Hey, what's up YouTube? Today is a joyous day. There are a lot of landmarks in humankind, and some of these include the invention of the wheel, the first moon landing, the invention of the cell phones, the invention of the internet, and now we have one of the best changes that mankind could ever envision, and that is the removal of Archnemesis and the Loot Goblin meta that has plagued PoE for the last league, leading to one of the most precipitous drops in player base known in this game's history. Now, you might think that this is an exaggeration, but after the Jewel Manifesto and seeing the community's reaction, I kind of came up with the idea that after Bex posted that they were going to release the Archnemesis Manifesto next, that they had some things in store that was going to satisfy the player base. And boy, oh boy, did they deliver. Now, this is the Reddit post, and look at this. Right here, you can see upvoted, right? So, for the first time in a long time, a GGG news post has had positive upvotage at 93% upvoted. So, when I saw this post on Reddit, before I even clicked it, I knew that they removed Archnemesis. Now, this is huge. So, you might be wondering, why do people hate Archnemesis so much? And what was exactly Archnemesis? So Archnemesis was pretty much a league that came out in Siege of the Atlas. Back then, you would put together these Archnemesis monster components, and you would summon this super rare to fight. Now, everyone did think that this Archnemesis Manifesto would be the most important, so they did say they were going to do the Jewel Manifesto, they were going to do the Curse Manifesto, the Archnemesis Manifesto, and lastly, the Eldritch Altar Manifesto. But this was the one that everyone thought would make or break 3.20. Now, the problem with Archnemesis was it led to very limited build diversity when you didn't have very good gear, pretty much because the mobs would be near unkillable. Now, I played the Endless Delve event with not a super strong build because in Endless Delve, you don't have access to a crafting bench for some strange reason. And Detonate Dead is also a single damage type build. So if you get a lot of fire resist Archnemesis mods, you are in a world of trouble. Now, Archnemesis also led to an unhealthy Loot Goblin meta because Archnemesis became tied to what actually dropped from the mobs. Now, this was really bad because once you saw that you had a specific Archnemesis mod, you would call in someone from TFT or from your friends list or whatever that had a magic find Culling character who would kill the monster so that you would get increased quantity and rarity. Now, this was a very, very degenerate playstyle that most people hated. No one wants to stop their mapping, phone a friend, call a magic find caller, or even worse, log into a magic find caller that you made and kill a mob. It is just a terrible, terrible playstyle. Now, GGG did give some answers about why they actually added the Archnemesis system, and it's pretty much because the old rare mod system was super confusing. People really had no idea what the rare monsters even had, and they just couldn't easily distinguish what mods were on a rare. Now, another thing that I think that GGG wanted to do was nerf Headhunter, and this Archnemesis Manifesto, even though it does remove the Archnemesis mods, it does kind of screw over Headhunter, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So like I said, what was exactly wrong with Archnemesis was that the keyword mod names were not fully descriptive of what they did. So for instance, when you see like Permafrost, Overcharged, Evocationist, Gargantuan, you have really no idea what these Archnemesis mods actually do. And in some cases, these things had like 5 different properties to them that converted Fizz to Chaos. They did like Fizz is extra Chaos. They would also give it Chaos Resist. And it was just a very, very bad scenario. So mods had multiple effects bundled together. Now, encounters also became way too complicated because of stacking effects / modifiers. So once you had a bunch of these Archnemesis mods together, you would get some crazy strong rare mob that was nearly unkillable. And if you got the really bad combination, you would pretty much have to skip the Archnemesis monster altogether. Now, lastly, the Archnemesis rewards being tied together meant that you had to find a magic find character because you would already know what was going to drop from the mob. So here is an article like Magic Find Colors in PoE explained, and that's never a good sign to see someone write an article about that. So you might be wondering, what did GGG do to change everything? And the first change right away is already extremely good, and its mods do one specific thing. So in this example right here, you can see Magma Barrier. Magma Barrier does a lot of stuff. It gives you increased fire damage to the mob, plus % fire resistance, gain 25% of physical damage as extra fire damage, 25% of physical damage converted to fire damage, and 25% additional physical damage reduction. So this thing would just be batshit insane. So now the new Magma Barrier will just put a Magma Barrier around the monster and does nothing else. So already this is an incredible nerf. So you're pretty much removing 5 of the mods from the rare monster. So it's actually insanity. So now mods say what they do. So it's hard to distinguish, for instance, what Incendiary actually does. And this is an example that they give. So Incendiary, unless you look it up on the wiki, you wouldn't know that it makes it so that the monster's hits always ignite, or 25% increased ignite duration on enemies. All damage can ignite. It now has plus 30% to fire resistance against damage over time. So this would screw over ignite builds, for instance. And then the monster will also have 100% increased ignite damage. So now instead of having just this one incendiary mod, the monster would have fire and ignite resistance, or just ignites. Now Deadeye is the same thing. Deadeye actually does like 5 different effects, but now instead of having all of these effects bundled together, you will just see applied random mark, extra crits, or accurate, making it a lot easier to understand what the hell is going on. So what does this actually mean for encounters in general? Well, the encounters are obviously going to be a lot easier. So the pool of mods that involve complex interactions have been heavily diluted. So what this means is that since these mods are being split into many different ones, so instead of Incendiary having a bunch of stuff, it now has like 2 or 3 different things, and Deadeye now has 3 things rather than just 1. That means there will be less of the complicated mods like the volatiles that chase you around, or corpse detonator and stuff like that. So you'll be a lot less likely to find that, and that also includes toxic with the balls that chase you around. This also means that you won't get as many crazy fights, not flights, but a lot of the fights will no longer be so crazy, because even if you get 2 to 4 mods, and that's how many GGG actually said would be going on the monsters, so the monsters will have 2 to 4 mods, so it's pretty much a drastic reduction in how strong the rares actually are. Now, sometimes you might get unlucky and you might still have some challenging fights with overlapping mods, but this is going to be much more rare than before. So you can just say straight up, if a mob used to have like 5 different things and now it only has 3 separate components, you can say that, oh, the monster got nerfed by an insane amount, and it's going to be at like 20 to 30% of its original power. Now, next up, this is the thing that pretty much caused the game to kind of go into a laughingstock stage. A lot of people compare PoE back to Diablo 3 and how you were trying to find a loot goblin. So in the latest patch, they actually did a pretty big loot overhaul in how loot actually dropped from the game, and that all of the rewards started being associated with individual mods in Archnemesis. Now, if you didn't know, Archnemesis, how it was designed originally was that each one of these components of the Archnemesis would do something, whether it convert the items to a certain type or convert it to currency. So you can see here, there's God Touch, that dropped items are converted to currency based on rarity. Dropped items are converted to maps, and you have Droughtbringer that convert everything to flasks. And what that meant was that when you find the right God Touch, and you'll easily be able to tell, you would call in a Magic Find Color. So now the solution that GGG has is that they added a new significant pool of rewards to rares. However, this significant pool of rewards is now hidden. So you have no idea what the monster is going to drop until you actually kill it. So the rare monsters with more mods are more likely to have special hidden reward mods. So now if you see a monster with 4 rare mods, then it's much more likely to have a good reward. So what this means is that will even out the spikiness of loot. We have no idea what these mods actually are, so we don't know if there's going to be hidden God Touch on some of these mobs, but regardless, it cannot be as crazy as before. We won't have like one mob dropping like a bulk of the currency. Now, these changes are really good, and it will make the game feel miles easier just taking it at face value. If you make it so that each rare monster pretty much has like 20 to 30% of the mods it used to have, that means the game is going to feel a lot better. Now, in terms of loot, it is pretty much too early to tell how the loot will even feel in juice maps with these changes. For all we know, the loot could potentially be worse because we have no idea what these hidden reward mods actually are. We have no idea how crazy they are. We have no idea how rare they are. And more than likely, magic finding is still going to be king for farming. It's just that you won't be able to call in a magic find caller. Now, it'll be interesting to see if the player base will still complain about magic finding, because they will realize that magic finding has been broken for a very long time, and magic finding has always felt extremely mandatory to be played if you really want to get the most loot out of your map. Now, the main thing that will affect a lot of the high-end people is that Headhunter is going to feel worse than ever. It's hard to really overstate the impact of these changes, and Headhunter is going to be completely trashed in my opinion, and Inspired Learning is literally going to be a dumpster tier unique jewel. So what this means is that for now, instead of stealing all of these mods, you'll only get a half of the mods for Incendiary, so you won't get Fire and Ignite resistant and Ignites. For Deadeye, you won't get all three, you only get one of them. And with how few rare monsters are on the map nowadays, it's going to be incredibly hard to get anywhere near the same sort of power as before. I'm actually curious to how much 5-way farming will be affected because of this change. But I do think that Headhunter and Inspired Learning will get heavily destroyed by this Archnemesis or rare mod rework. Now, the system is pretty much the same as before, but with better clarity, so they will list the mods differently to make it easier to see. Maybe it's going to be color-coded or something like that. But it is nice to see that the Archnemesis experience has finally ended, but the reward types mod still has me a little bit concerned, although it can't really get much worse than the Loot Goblin meta. But in the end, it's going to be something new to figure out. Like, people will slowly start to realize what type of reward mods are there, and it's going to be nice to not know exactly what the monster is going to be dropping. It's going to be nice knowing, oh, I accidentally killed a God Touch, and I should have gotten like 10 Divines if I called in a Magic Find Caller. Now, that feeling will just no longer exist. And I do think that this Archnemesis Manifesto has pretty much saved 3.20. I think it will have a revived player base. A lot of people, when you read in what would make you come back to 3.20, I do think the number one thing I read was the removal of Archnemesis and the Magic Find Culling meta. This one manifesto truly, I believe, will save PoE for 3.20. Now, whether the loot will feel better in high end, that's something else to be discussed when it actually comes out, but that much upvoting is kind of scary, right? Or the community cannot possibly be sad about what happens here. Now, this thing right here I wanted to point out was GGG is currently looking at a maximum of 2 to 4 modifiers per rare monster. So do not fear, the rare monster won't suddenly have like 10 different modifiers to compensate for the Archnemesis nerf. Now, another thing I think that will get affected is that off-meta builds will be able to play it a lot more, because I do think the biggest thing about Archnemesis from the past in terms of build diversity early on is that when you have low gear, you pretty much cannot play the game because the Archnemesis monsters really are that OP. But thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know down in the comments below if you think that this is the best manifesto that has happened to PoE, and if you will be returning to 3.20 to play a much easier version of PoE where loot is raining from the sky randomly and not from loot goblins. But thanks for watching, and I hope you find more mirrors, exalts, and divine orbs than me, and see you next time. Bye!